The world woke up on April 8th to news nobody was sure they could trust. A ceasefire. After 40 days of U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, after Khamenei was killed on the very first day of the war, after missiles, closed shipping lanes, and the entire global economy holding its breath, Pakistan had brokered a deal. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif announced the agreement after weeks of quiet diplomacy. Iran would accept a 2-week pause in fighting, and, crucially, Iran would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway carrying 20% of the world's oil that Iran had shut down the moment the bombs started falling. Trump announced it on social media, calling it a big day for world peace. Markets surged, oil prices dropped. In the streets of Tehran, people flooded out into the night waving Iranian flags, exhausted but celebrating what their government was already calling a victory. The relief lasted a matter of hours, because while the US and Iran had agreed to stop shooting at each other, nobody had told Israel to stop shooting at Lebanon, and Israel had no intention of stopping. Within hours of the ceasefire announcement, Israeli jets launched their largest strikes on Beirut since the war began. Over 250 people killed in a single day. Lebanon declared a national day of mourning. And Iran, watching its ally being bombed while it had just agreed to stand down, was furious. Israel's position was blunt. Netanyahu said the ceasefire applied to Iran, not to Hezbollah in Lebanon. His office said Israel supports pausing strikes on Iran, but the fight against Hezbollah continues until all objectives are achieved. The problem was that Pakistan, the country that brokered the entire deal, said Lebanon was included. Iran said Lebanon was included, and Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi posted publicly that the U.S. must choose ceasefire or continued war via Israel. It cannot have both. Trump was now caught between two things he wanted: the deal with Iran he was already claiming as a historic victory, and his unconditional support for Israel. The Strait of Hormuz, which was supposed to be reopening, was already closing again. Iran paused ship passage in response to Israeli strikes on Lebanon. The White House denied it. Maritime data showed only 3 ships had made it through since the ceasefire was announced. Back in Tehran, the mood was complicated. Iranians, who had survived 40 days of strikes, who had lost their supreme leader, who had watched their military get hammered, were not in a forgiving mood. Some burned American and Israeli flags. Others questioned why Iran should reopen the strait at all while Israel kept killing people in Lebanon. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, declared that Iran had won the war. He demanded war reparations and said Iran would never surrender. Whatever his negotiators agreed to in a conference room, the Islamic Republic was not quietly accepting anything that looked like defeat. Looming over everything was the question that never goes away: nuclear enrichment. Trump's team called Iran's right to enrich uranium a red line the president will not cross. Iran said it will not surrender its nuclear program under any circumstances. That single issue collapsed negotiations in February before the war even started. It remained unresolved at the ceasefire table. Iran's parliament speaker announced 3 clauses of the ceasefire had already been violated on day 1. Israeli attacks on Lebanon, a drone entering Iranian airspace, enrichment rights being denied. He said under those conditions, negotiations were unreasonable. Meanwhile, 26 South Korean oil tankers sat stranded. Shipping companies told vessels to stay put. Insurance rates for attempting the crossing were through the roof. The global economy was not breathing freely yet. Then, on April 10th today, U.S. and Iranian officials sat across from each other in Pakistan's capital for the first time under Pakistani mediation. Nuclear enrichment, Lebanon, Hormuz, sanctions, war reparations, all of it on the table. Nobody expects this to be easy, and Netanyahu's continued assault on Lebanon is a live grenade sitting in the middle of every conversation. The guns between the U.S. and Iran are technically paused. The strait is technically open, but barely moving. Israel is technically supporting the ceasefire, but bombing Lebanon daily. Both sides talking while accusing each other of violations. This ceasefire is hanging by a thread. Whether it holds, whether the talks produce anything real, whether Israel's actions destroy the entire process, nobody knows. What is clear is that the Middle East before February 28, 2026 is gone, and what comes next will define the region for a generation.